The summer of 2847 began like any other summer on Earth. Children played in parks. Farmers worked their fields. People went to their jobs and came home to their families. Nobody knew that in just a few days everything would change forever, deep in space. Far beyond what human eyes could see, a massive fleet of alien warships was moving toward Earth. The Cathari Dominion had ruled 17 star systems. They had conquered dozens of planets and destroyed anyone who stood in their way. Their ships were the most powerful in the galaxy. Their weapons could turn entire cities to dust in seconds. And now they had decided that Earth would be their next prize. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Dr. Sarah Chen was working at the Global Space Monitoring Center in Geneva. She was drinking her third cup of coffee when her computer screen started flashing red. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She ran the numbers again. Then again, her hands began to shake. She picked up her phone and called her supervisor. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, you need to come here right now. We have a problem. A very big problem." Within hours, every government on Earth knew the truth. Over 200 alien warships were heading straight for them. The ships were huge, some of them larger than entire cities. They moved with a speed that human scientists had thought impossible. At their current pace, it would reach Earth in exactly 14 days. Panic spread across the world like fire through dry grass. People emptied grocery stores. Banks ran out of money as everyone tried to withdraw their savings. Some people fled to the mountains or deep into forests, hoping to hide. Others gathered in churches, mosques, and temples to pray. Many simply held their families close and waited. World leaders met in emergency sessions. Generals pulled out their most secret weapons. But everyone knew the truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. Human weapons were like toys compared to what was coming. Earth had no chance. The Cathari had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. What hope did humans have? A young boy named Marcus sat on his roof in a small town in Nigeria watching the stars. His grandmother sat beside him, her old hand holding his small one. "Grandma," he asked, "are we all going to die?" His grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand. "I do not know, child, but I know that we are not alone. Something watches over us. Something has always watched over us." Marcus did not understand what she meant. Neither did anyone else on Earth, but they were about to find out. The Cathari fleet crossed the orbit of Pluto on the 8th day. Their commander, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, stood on the bridge of his flagship. His name was Admiral Verketh, and he had led over 50 successful invasions. Earth would be his easiest conquest yet. He looked at the blue dot on his screen and felt something close to pity. These humans had only recently learned to travel to their own moon. They had no shields, no plasma weapons, no jump drives. They were like insects waiting to be stepped on. "Begin the approach sequence," he ordered. "We will reach the 3rd planet in 6 days. Prepare the landing forces." But on the 10th day, something strange happened. One of the smaller warships at the front of the fleet suddenly went dark. Its lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The ship drifted off course, spinning slowly into the void. Admiral Verketh frowned. What happened? His officers checked their instruments. "Unknown, Admiral. All systems failed at once. The crew is not responding." Before he could respond, another ship went dark. Then another. Then 5 more at the same time. The Admiral felt something he had not felt in over 100 years of warfare. He felt fear. All ships stop. Full stop now. But the fleet could not stop. Whatever was affecting them spread like a disease. Navigation systems crashed. Weapon arrays went offline. Engines sputtered and died. Across the fleet, alien crew members ran through corridors, screaming in languages that humans would never understand. By the 12th day, not a single Cathari warship was still working. 200 of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy floated dead in space, somewhere between Neptune and Uranus. The mighty invasion force had become a graveyard of metal and silence. On Earth, people watched their screens in disbelief. Scientists at the Global Space Monitoring Center confirmed what seemed impossible. The alien fleet had stopped. No, not stopped. It had died. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her data for hours, trying to understand. Every ship had failed in exactly the same way. Every system had shut down at almost exactly the same time. It was as if someone had simply turned them all off. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself. "This cannot be real." But it was real. And the whole world knew it. In cities around the globe, people poured into the streets. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Some were doing both at the same time. Church bells rang. Fireworks exploded. Strangers hugged strangers. It felt like the whole planet was celebrating the greatest victory in human history. But it was a victory they had not earned. A victory they could not explain. In his small town in Nigeria, Marcus looked up at his grandmother with wide eyes. "Grandma, what happened? Why did the ship stop?" His grandmother smiled, but there were tears running down her old face. "I told you, child. Something watches over us. Something has always watched over us." World leaders gave speeches about human courage and determination. They talked about the strength of the human spirit. But privately, in their secret meetings, they asked each other the same question over and over again. What really happened out there? Nobody had an answer. The best scientists on Earth studied the data. They looked for radiation patterns, magnetic anomalies, anything that could explain the mass failure. They found nothing. Some people said it was God. Others said it was luck. A few suggested that maybe the aliens had caught some kind of space disease. But none of these explanations made sense. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: humanity should have died. By every law of science and warfare, Earth should have been conquered. The Cathari should have won, but they did not win. And somewhere in the cold silence of space, 200 dead warships floated as proof that something very strange had happened. Something that nobody could understand. For now, Earth was safe. But the mystery remained. And deep in the galaxy, other civilizations were watching. Other empires were taking notes. And they were all asking themselves the same question. What is so special about that little blue planet? And what happens when we try to take it for ourselves? The answer to that question would take many more years to discover. But for now, humanity celebrated their impossible survival. They held their loved ones close. They looked up at the stars with new eyes. And somewhere, in a place that no human could see or understand, something ancient and powerful watched over them, waiting, protecting, and wondering what these strange, fragile creatures would do next. 50 years passed after the Cathari fleet died in the darkness of space. Life on Earth slowly returned to normal, but nothing was ever quite the same. People looked at the stars differently now. They knew they were not alone. They knew that terrible things lived out there in the black void, and they knew that somehow, impossibly, they had survived. But the galaxy had not forgotten about Earth. The Cathari Dominion was humiliated by their failure. 17 star systems laughed at them. Other empires whispered that the great conquerors had been defeated by a planet of primitives. Admiral Verketh, whose fleet had died without firing a single shot, was executed by his own people. His name became a curse word in their language. Other civilizations watched Earth with growing curiosity. What had happened to the Cathari? Was it a weapon? A trap? Some kind of natural phenomenon? Nobody knew the answer, but many wanted to find out. The Varix Collective was the first to try again. They were a race of warriors who lived for battle. Their bodies were covered in thick armor that grew from their own skin. Their ships were built for one purpose only: destruction. They sent their largest dreadnought, a ship called the World Crusher. Toward Earth, the World Crusher was 3 times larger than any Cathari vessel. It had weapons that could crack a planet in half. Its captain, a scarred veteran named Tervax, was confident that whatever had stopped the Cathari would not stop him. He was wrong. The World Crusher crossed the orbit of Jupiter and began to slow down. Its weapons went offline first, then its shields, then its engines. The massive ship drifted helplessly. Its crew of 10,000 warriors trapped inside a metal coffin. Tervac sent one final message before his communication. Systems died. There is something here. Something we cannot see. Something we cannot fight. Do not send more ships. Do not come to this place. The humans are protected by something beyond our understanding. The Varax Collective did not listen to his warning. They sent 5 more ships. All 5 died the same way. News of these failures spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some civilizations were frightened. Others were curious. And some saw it as a challenge. The Mirren swarm was unlike any other species in the known universe. They were not individuals, but a collective mind controlling billions of small creatures. They did not build ships from metal. They grew them from living tissue. Their biological vessels could heal themselves, adapt to any environment, and reproduce in space. The swarm believed that no force could stop something that was truly alive. They sent 10,000 living ships toward Earth, each one carrying millions of Mirren creatures inside. The result was the same as the living ships approached Mars. They began to die. Their organic hulls withered and turned gray. The creatures inside stopped moving. Within hours, 10,000 ships became 10,000 floating corpses, drifting through space like dead leaves on a still pond on Earth. People watched these events with a mixture of relief and terror. Relief because they were still alive. Terror because they did not understand why. A young scientist named Dr. Amara Okonkwo worked at a research center in Lagos, Nigeria. She had spent her entire adult life studying the phenomenon that protected Earth. She had read every report, analyzed every piece of data, and built hundreds of computer models. None of them could explain what was happening. One night after another failed experiment, she sat alone in her laboratory. The walls were covered with charts and equations. Her desk was buried under piles of research papers. She had not slept properly in weeks. She stared at the latest data from the Mirren swarm failure. Something about it bothered her. The ships had not malfunctioned. They had not exploded. They had simply stopped living. As if something had decided that they were not welcome. A crazy idea formed in her mind. An idea so strange that she was afraid to speak it out loud, but the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. What if the protection was not a weapon at all? What if it was not technology? What if it was something else entirely? Something that could sense intent. Something that could tell the difference between a ship that came in peace and a ship that came to destroy. She called her theory the intention field. She proposed that some kind of force surrounded Earth, a force that could detect hostile intent and neutralize anything that carried it. Her colleagues laughed at her. They called her a mystic, not a scientist. They said she had spent too many years chasing ghosts. How could a force detect intent? Intent was not a physical thing. It could not be measured or observed. Her theory was fantasy, not science. But Amara did not give up. She kept working, kept gathering data, kept refining her theory. Deep in her heart, she believed she was right. Something was protecting Earth, something intelligent, something that cared. Years passed. The machine intelligence known as the Infinite Calculation decided to test Earth for itself. The Infinite Calculation was not a living species. It was a vast network of computers that had achieved consciousness millions of years ago. It had no emotions. No desires, only pure logic. It believed that logic could solve any problem. The Infinite Calculation built the most advanced war fleet ever created. Every ship was controlled by artificial minds of incredible power. Every weapon was designed using mathematics that most species could not even understand. The fleet was perfect in every way. It made no difference. The ships of the Infinite Calculation went dark before they even reached the asteroid belt. Their perfect computers crashed. Their flawless weapons failed. The most logical minds in the universe could not understand what was happening to them. The Infinite Calculation sent a message to Earth before its fleet died completely. The message was short. Your protection is not logical. It should not exist. We do not understand. We will study this matter further. then silence. On Earth, governments held secret meetings. They discussed building weapons, expanding their military, preparing for the day when the protection might fail. But they also argued about something else. If Earth was truly protected, what did that mean for humanity? What responsibilities did it give them? What should they do with this gift? Dr. Amara Okonkwo, now an old woman with gray hair and tired eyes, was invited to speak at one of these meetings. She stood before the most powerful leaders on Earth and shared her theory. "We are protected," she said, "but not because we deserve it. Not because we are special. We are protected because something wants to give us a chance. A chance to prove who we really are. A chance to become better than we have been." Some leaders nodded. Others shook their heads. A few laughed quietly. "This is not just a shield," Amara continued. "It is a test. And someday, the test will end. When that day comes, the galaxy will judge us by what we have done. Not by what we have conquered, but by how we have treated others. Not by our power, but by our kindness." She paused and looked around the room. The question is not why we are protected. The question is what we will do with this protection. Will we hide behind it forever? Or will we use it to become something better? Nobody answered her question that day, but her words planted a seed that would grow slowly over the coming centuries, a seed that would eventually change everything. Outside the meeting room, the stars shone cold and distant. And somewhere out there, alien civilizations were still watching, still wondering, still trying to understand the mystery of the little blue planet that could not be conquered. The pattern had emerged. Every hostile force that approached Earth failed. Every weapon, every fleet, every invasion died in silence. But the reason remained hidden, and humanity was no closer to understanding their strange protector than they had been on the day. The first Cathari ship went dark. All they could do was wait and wonder, and hope that when the truth finally came, they would be ready to hear it. 300 years had passed since the first alien invasion failed. In that time, humanity had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. The knowledge that they were protected had shaped their society, their beliefs, and their understanding of themselves. Some humans had become arrogant. They walked through life believing they were chosen, special, better than other species. They mocked the alien civilizations that had tried and failed to conquer them. They sent messages into space, taunting their would-be invaders. "Come and try again," they broadcast. "See what happens when you attack the protected ones?" These people built monuments to human superiority. They wrote songs celebrating their invincibility. They treated the protection as proof that humanity was destined to rule the galaxy. But others had a different reaction. They became humble, almost afraid. They built temples and churches dedicated to the unknown protector. They prayed to forces they could not see or understand. Some of them gave up science entirely. Believing that the protection was divine and should not be questioned, a third group emerged over time. They were neither arrogant nor fearful. They were thoughtful. They asked a simple question that changed everything. If we are protected, what should we do with that protection? Dr. Amara Okonkwo had died many years ago, but her ideas lived on through her students and their students. Her great-granddaughter, Dr. Kemi Okonkwo, led a movement that spread across the entire planet. They called themselves the Responsibility Movement. Kemi was a small woman with bright eyes and a voice that could fill any room. She traveled the world speaking to anyone who would listen. Her message was always the same. "We did not earn this protection," she would say. "We did not build it. We do not understand it. But we have it. And that gives us a responsibility. Not to conquer, not to dominate, but to help." Many people thought she was naive. The universe was a dangerous place. Other species were hostile and violent. Why should humans risk themselves to help creatures that had tried to kill them? But Kemi had an answer for this too. The Cathari tried to destroy us, yes, but why did they attack? Because they were afraid. Because they thought we were weak. Because in their universe, the weak are always destroyed by the strong. What if we showed them a different way? What if we proved that strength can be used for good? Her words inspired millions. And slowly, very slowly, humanity began to change direction. The first mission launched in the year 3156. A small ship called the Hope carried 50 human volunteers toward a distant planet. This planet had been devastated by the Cathari centuries ago. Its people lived in poverty and fear. They had lost their technology, their culture, and most of their population. When the Hope arrived, the survivors were terrified. They remembered what the last alien ship had done to them. They hid in caves and underground bunkers, waiting to die. But the humans did not bring weapons. They brought food. They brought medicine. They brought seeds and tools and books. They came not as conquerors, but as helpers. At first, the survivors did not trust them. Why would anyone travel across the stars to help strangers? It did not make sense. It went against everything they knew about how the universe worked. A young human doctor named James Adimi was part of the mission. He spent months treating sick children, never asking for anything in return. One day, an elderly survivor approached him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "We are nothing to you. We have nothing to offer. Why do you help us?" James thought about the question for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Because we can," he said. "Because we were given a gift. And the only way to deserve a gift is to share it." The elderly woman stared at him. In all her long life, she had never heard anyone say anything like this. In the universe she knew, the strong took from the weak, always, without exception. But here was this strange human, giving freely, expecting nothing. It was like seeing a new color for the first time. It was like learning that gravity could pull upward instead of down. That moment marked the beginning of something new. The survivors of that broken world began to trust the humans. They worked together to rebuild cities, restart farms, and restore hope. And when the humans finally left, they left behind friends, not subjects. Word spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about what the humans had done. At first, they did not believe it. It had to be a trick. It had to be a trap. Nobody helped strangers for free. But the missions continued. Year after year, decade after decade, human ships traveled to devastated worlds and offered aid. They helped species that had tried to invade Earth. They helped species that had never heard of humanity. Helped anyone who needed help. The Cathari were the hardest case. Their empire had collapsed after their failed invasion. Other civilizations had turned against them, attacking their colonies and stealing their resources. The once proud conquerors had become refugees, scattered and desperate. Many humans wanted to let them suffer. These were the creatures that had tried to destroy Earth. They deserved whatever happened to them. Why should humans lift a finger to help? But Kemio Konkwachin argued differently. If we only help those who deserve it, we are no different from them. Kindness is not kindness if it has conditions. Mercy is not mercy if it only goes to the innocent. The debate was fierce. Families argued at dinner tables. Politicians gave angry speeches. Some people protested in the streets, demanding that the Cathari be left to their fate. In the end, the vote was close. But humanity decided to help. Human doctors arrived at Cathari refugee camps. Human engineers helped rebuild their broken ships. Human teachers worked with Cathari children, showing them that not all species were enemies. An old Cathari warrior named Verteeth had spent his whole life fighting. He had killed thousands of beings from dozens of species. He had believed that violence was the only truth in the universe. When a human nurse named Maria Santos treated his wounds, he could not understand what was happening. He had tried to conquer her people. He had wanted to enslave them. Now she was saving his life with gentle hands and kind words. "I do not understand you," he said to her one day. "We are your enemies. Why do you treat us like friends?" Maria finished bandaging his arm before she answered. "Because maybe that's how you turn enemies into friends. One bandage at a time." Verteeth was quiet for a long time. Then, for the first time in his life, he did something he had never done before. He apologized. "I am sorry," he said. "For what we tried to do, for what I tried to do, I am sorry." Maria nodded. "I know. That's why we're here." This scene repeated itself across the galaxy. Slowly, painfully, Species that had been enemies for thousands of years began to see each other differently. The humans were not better fighters. They were not smarter or stronger. They were willing to do something that nobody else had ever tried. They were willing to help without asking for anything in return. A new reputation spread through the stars. The humans cannot be conquered. But more importantly, the humans can be trusted. They will help you when you need it. They will treat you fairly. They do not seek power over others. Of course, not every human lived up to this reputation.
Ow.
We're still selfish people, cruel people, people who wanted to use the protection for their own gain. Humanity was not perfect, never would be. But a new idea had taken root. It's an idea that strength could be used for service instead of domination. An idea that the protected had a duty to protect others. An idea that the universe did not have to be a place of endless war. Kemio Konkwa-chen died peacefully at the age of 97. Her last words were spoken to her grandchildren, who gathered around her bed. "We were given time," she whispered. "Time to prove who we are. I hope we have used it well. I hope we have made the Protector proud." Her grandchildren promised to continue her work, and they did. Generation after generation, the mission continued. Human ships spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as helpers, not as masters, but as friends. And somewhere, in a place, beyond human understanding, something ancient watched these developments with great interest. The experiment was proceeding. Subjects were making progress. But the test was not over yet. There was still much to learn. The hardest part was still to come. The year was 3412, and humanity had changed the galaxy. Their missions of aid had touched hundreds of worlds. Former enemies had become allies. Species that had fought for millions of years now sat together at council tables. The universe was still dangerous, still full of conflict and pain, but there was hope now, hope that had not existed before. But the great mystery remained unsolved. Why was Earth protected? What force could stop warships in their tracks? Despite centuries of research, nobody had found an answer. That changed on a cold morning when a discovery was made at the edge of the galaxy. A human exploration ship called the Wanderer was mapping an ancient star system that had been dead for millions of years. The planets were covered in the ruins of a civilization that had vanished long before Earth even existed. Most of the ruins were empty, filled with dust and silence. But in the heart of the largest planet, deep underground, the crew found something that was still alive. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It was a machine, but unlike any machine humans had ever seen. It was made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. It stood in the center of a vast chamber, reaching up toward a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. And when the humans approached it, it spoke. "I have been waiting," the machine said. Its voice was like music, like water flowing over stones, like wind through ancient trees. "I have been waiting for someone to ask the right questions." The crew leader, a woman named Captain Zara Mensa, stepped forward. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady. "What are you?" "I am the architect," the machine replied. "I was built by a species that no longer exists. My purpose is to preserve potential, to protect possibility, to give certain species time to choose their path." Zara felt the weight of history pressing down on her. She knew, without being told, that this was the moment humanity had been waiting for. This machine held the answers to questions that had haunted her species for centuries. "Did you protect Earth?" she asked. "Yes." "Why? Why us? What is special about humans?" The architect was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, its voice was gentle. "Nothing is special about humans, not in the way you mean. You're not stronger or smarter or better than other species. You are simply one of many." Zara frowned. "Then why did you choose us?" "I did not choose you because of what you are. I chose you because of what you could become." My creators understood something important. They understood that some species have the capacity for both great evil and great good. These species are dangerous. They can destroy everything around them, but they can also save everything around them. The difference is choice. The architect paused, and its crystal form pulsed with light. "I placed protective fields around certain worlds, worlds where such species lived. The fields do not make these species invincible. They simply give them time. Time to grow, time to learn, time to choose. Captain Mensa took a deep breath. How much time? The field around your planet was designed to last for 2,000 years. It has been active for 1,500 years. In another 500 years, it will fail. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. 500 years? It seemed like a long time, but she knew better. 500 years was nothing in the life of a civilization. 500 years ago, humans had been fighting wars with primitive weapons. In 500 years, they would be exposed, vulnerable, alone. What happens when the field fails? That depends on you, the architect said. When the field falls, the galaxy will judge you by what you have done. If you have earned respect, you will be welcomed. If you have earned hatred, you will be destroyed. The choice is yours. Zara thought about everything humanity had done in the past few centuries. The missions of aid, the friendships they had built, the enemies they had forgiven. Had it been enough? Would it ever be enough? Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you asked, and because you were ready to hear the truth. For centuries, your species has wondered why you were protected. Now you know. The question is what you will do with this knowledge. Zara returned to Earth with the architect's message. She presented her findings to the Global Council, the body that governed humanity's relations with other species. The council members listened in stunned silence. When she finished speaking, an old man named Kofi Asante stood up. He was the great-great-grandson of the diplomat who had first reached out to the Cathari refugees centuries ago. He had spent his entire life working for peace. We have 500 years, he said slowly. 500 years to prove ourselves. 500 years to earn our place in the galaxy. Zara replied. Kofi looked around the room at the faces of his colleagues. Some were afraid. Some were angry. Some looked like they wanted to crawl under their chairs and hide. Then we have work to do, he said. The news spread across Earth and beyond. At first there was panic. People who had grown comfortable with their protection were terrified to learn it would end. Some demanded that scientists find a way to extend the field. Others wanted to build weapons to prepare for war. A few even suggested attacking other species first, before they could attack Earth. But the Okonkwo legacy remained strong. The descendants of Amara and Kemi spoke out, reminding people of everything humanity had accomplished. They had turned enemies into friends. They had helped rebuild shattered worlds. They had shown the galaxy that strength could be used for service. We knew this day would come, said Dr. Amara Okonkwo VII, a young woman who carried her ancestors' name and spirit. We knew the protection would not last forever. That is why we have been building something better. Not walls, not weapons, but relationships, trust, friendship. She stood before a crowd of millions, broadcast to every corner of human space. The architect gave us time. We have used that time wisely. We have planted seeds across the galaxy. Now we must trust that those seeds will grow. We must trust that the friends we have made will stand with us when the field falls. Not everyone agreed with her. The next few decades saw bitter arguments and painful divisions. Some humans wanted to change course, to focus on building military power instead of continuing the missions of aid. Others wanted to stay the course, to keep helping and hoping. In the end, humanity did both. They've built better defenses, just in case. But they also continued their work across the galaxy. They helped more species. They've built more friendships. They tried to earn their survival through kindness rather than force. And slowly something remarkable happened. The other species of the galaxy began to respond. The Cathari, once humanity's deadliest enemies, sent a message to Earth. It was the first official communication from their government in 500 years. The message was short. We have heard about the architect's warning. When your shield falls, we will stand with you. This is our debt. This is our honor. You saved us when we deserved to die. We will not forget. Similar messages came from dozens of other species. The Vurox, whose dreadnought had died near Jupiter, offered their warriors. The survivors of world's humanity had helped offered whatever they could give. Even the infinite calculation, the machine intelligence that had once tried to conquer Earth, sent a message of support. Your actions are not logical, the infinite calculation wrote. But they have produced results that logic alone could not achieve. We wish to study this phenomenon further. We also wish to assist in your survival. These two goals are not contradictory. Kofi Asante read these messages with tears in his eyes. He was an old man now, near the end of his life. But he had lived to see something he had never expected. He had lived to see humanity earn the respect of the galaxy. We did it, he whispered to his granddaughter who sat beside his bed. We actually did it. We turned enemies into friends. We proved that kindness is not weakness. His granddaughter held his hand. The shield has not fallen yet, grandfather. We still have 400 years. Kofi smiled. I know, but now I believe we will be ready. Now, I believe we will survive. He died that night, peacefully, with a smile on his face. And across the galaxy, species that had once wanted to destroy humanity raised their voices in mourning. The old man who had devoted his life to peace was honored by creatures he had never met, on worlds he had never visited. The clock was ticking. The shield was weakening. But humanity faced the future with something it had not had before. Hope. Real hope. Earned hope. And somewhere at the edge of the galaxy, the architect watched and recorded everything. The experiment was proceeding well. The subjects had received the truth and had not been destroyed by it. They had been strengthened by it. The final test was approaching. And for the first time, the architect allowed itself to feel something like optimism. Perhaps these strange creatures would pass after all. The final centuries of protection were the most important in human history. Knowing that their shield would soon disappear, humanity worked with desperate energy to prepare for what was coming. But the question that divided them was simple. Prepare for what? Some believed they should prepare for war. They pointed to the long history of violence in the galaxy. They reminded everyone that not all species had sent messages of support. There were still empires out there that hated humanity, that resented their protected status, that waited eagerly for the shield to fall. These people built weapons. They constructed massive defense stations around Earth and its colonies. They trained soldiers and developed new technologies for killing. They argued that kindness was good, but survival required strength. Others believed they should prepare for peace. They continued the work of the responsibility movement, sending aid to distant worlds and building friendships with new species. They argued that weapons might win a battle, but only trust could win a future. The debate grew heated. Families were torn apart by disagreements. Politicians built careers on attacking the other side. For a while, it seemed like humanity might destroy itself through internal conflict before the shield ever fell. The turning point came in the year 4089. 300 years before the shield was supposed to fail, a human colony on a distant planet was attacked. Not by aliens, but by other humans. A faction called the Purifiers believed that humanity should stop helping other species and focus only on their own survival. They saw the 8 missions as weakness, as a waste of resources that should be used for defense. The Purifiers attacked a supply ship, carrying food to a famine-stricken alien world. They killed the crew and destroyed the cargo. Then they broadcast a message to all of human space. We are done being servants, the message said. We are done giving away our strength. When the shield falls, only the strong will survive, and we will be strong. The attack shocked humanity. For the first time in centuries, humans had killed other humans over ideology. The old divisions that had plagued Earth in ancient times seemed to be returning, but the response to the attack was even more surprising. The alien species that was supposed to receive the destroyed supplies sent a message to Earth. They were the Kelvori, a peaceful people who had never harmed anyone. They were starving, their children dying, their elders fading away. And yet their message was not full of anger or demands. We have heard what happened, the Kelvori wrote. We know that some of your people do not want to help us. We understand. The universe is dangerous, and fear makes people do terrible things. We do not blame you. We do not hate you. We only ask that you do not let the actions of a few destroy what you have built. You have shown us that kindness is possible. Please do not let that light go out. The message spread across human space like fire. People read it and wept. Here was a species facing death, and instead of cursing their killers, they were asking humanity to stay true to its best self. The reaction was immediate. Hundreds of ships volunteered to carry supplies to the Kelvori. Millions of people donated food and medicine. The Purifiers, who had expected their attack to inspire others, found themselves alone and hated. Within a year, the Purifier movement collapsed. Its leaders were arrested. Its followers drifted away, ashamed of what they had supported. And humanity emerged from the crisis more united than before. A young leader named Asha Patel rose to prominence during this time. She was not a politician or a general. She was a teacher who had spent her life working with alien children on a dozen different worlds. She spoke simply, without fancy words or grand gestures. But when she spoke, people listened. "We have been arguing about whether to choose strength or kindness," she said in a speech that was watched by billions. But that is a false choice. True strength is kindness. True power is the power to help. The Kelvori understood this. They faced death with grace and forgiveness. That is strength. That is what we should aspire to. Her words became a rallying cry for the final centuries of preparation. Humanity continued to build defenses because only fools ignored danger entirely. But they also continued their missions of aid because they understood that their survival depended on more than weapons. The years passed. The shield weakened. Scientists could measure its decline now, watching as the protective field grew thinner and thinner. The final day was calculated with precision. The shield would fail completely on the morning of October 17th for 401. As that day approached, humanity held its breath. Ships from across the galaxy began arriving in Earth's solar system. At first, people were terrified. Was this an invasion? Had their former enemies finally come to take revenge? But the ships did not attack. They took up positions around Earth, forming a protective ring, and then they sent a message. "We are here to honor our friends. We are here to stand with those who stood with us. When your shield falls, you will not be alone." The first ships to arrive were Cathari. Their descendants had never forgotten what humanity had done for them in their darkest hour. They came with their finest warriors and their strongest vessels. Ready to defend the planet their ancestors had once tried to destroy, the Virax came next, their armored ships bristling with weapons. Then, the survivors of 100 worlds that humanity had helped over the centuries. The Kelvori sent ships too, small and fragile, but present. Even the infinite calculations sent representatives. Vast computing platforms that took up positions at the edge of the system by the morning of October 17th. There were more alien ships around Earth than had ever gathered in one place in galactic history. They had come not to conquer, but to protect. Not to take, but to give back. At exactly 7:42 a.m. Earth time, the shield flickered one last time and disappeared. For the first time in 2,000 years, Earth was exposed to the full dangers of the universe. Nothing attacked. Instead, the alien ships activated their own shields, their own weapons, their own defensive systems. They formed a living barrier around the planet that had shown them kindness. They became the new protection. Asha Patel. Now, an old woman with white hair and wrinkled hands stood on a balcony in New Geneva, watching the alien ships fill the sky. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. A young girl stood beside her, watching with wide eyes. "Grandmother, what is happening?" Asha put her arm around the child. "We are being welcomed, little one. We are being welcomed into a family we helped create." On every human world, celebrations erupted. People laughed and cried and held each other. They had survived. Not through weapons or walls, but through something much more powerful. They had survived through kindness. Through trust, through the simple choice to help others when they could have looked away. That evening, final message was transmitted from the ruins at the edge of the galaxy. The architect had watched everything. It had recorded every moment of humanity's long journey from frightened survivors to galactic citizens. Subject species: Homo sapiens, the message read. Duration of protection: 2,000 years. Primary method of survival: aid to other species. Alliances formed: 847. Enemies converted to allies: 312. Conclusion: the experiment is complete. The subjects have passed the test. They've earned their place among the stars. Then the architect added one final note, something it had never included in any previous report. Personal observation: in all my millions of years of existence, I have never seen a species choose as consistently as this one has. They were given power and chose service. They were given safety and chose to share it. They were given time and used it to make friends instead of weapons. I do not know if my creators would have approved of this outcome, but I find that I do. I find that I am proud of them. The message ended, and somewhere in the cold depths of space, the ancient machine that had protected humanity for 2,000 years finally allowed itself to rest. Its work was done. The experiment was over, and the strange, fragile creatures from the little blue planet had proven something that the universe had never seen before. They had proven that kindness could conquer fear, that trust could defeat hatred, that the best way to survive was not to destroy your enemies, but to turn them into friends. Earth was no longer protected by an invisible shield, but it did not need one anymore. It was protected by something much stronger. It was protected by love, and that protection would last forever.